Hello, my students. I am going to talk to you today about something that I love. I know many of you often joke or think that actually I love evidence, but I dance with evidence publicly. I secretly dance with analysis. I love, when I read strong, brilliant analysis, it does make my heart sing. So I really am in love with analysis. So the question is, and so many of you have asked this, how do I write analysis in a T paragraph? Laurie Fisher, the brilliant Laurie Fisher, has created this document to help us really see and understand how to do this well. And I am just going to walk you through it. So, the purpose. People often struggle with figuring out how to flesh out a paragraph. While they may have a strong grasp of a topic sentence and well-chosen evidence, often the substance of the paragraph becomes thin right when it should be getting stronger. So the guidelines outlined below will help you in forming an analytical essay. So, quick reminder about topic sentences. Boom. Topic sentence. What is the argument being made in this paragraph? This is such an important thing. Often people don't realize that readers need guidance, right? So it is not about you writing. It is about how is the reader making sense of what you are writing. So here you should summarize the main idea of this paragraph in one sentence. This should be a smaller argument that builds towards the argument of your thesis statement. So here's an example. While the public perception is that teenagers are taking risks in larger numbers, recent data shows that the number might be fewer than people think. Okay, I as a reader now know what you're going to talk to me about, that the numbers might be fewer than we think, right? Teenagers taking less risks. Okay, a reminder about evidence really quickly. Evidence. Oh, remember me, evidence? Hi, buddy. Evidence. What data, research, or specific examples support the claim of your topic sentence and your thesis statement? Here you should paraphrase, put in your own words, or quote specific data, research, or examples that support your claim. Any quotes should be set up and they should be cited in MLA in-text citations. We've gone over that a lot of times, but if you need to, there are more resources on that on my digital portfolio. So here's an example. I'm going to read the topic sentence so you start to see the connections. While the public perception is that teenagers are taking risks in larger numbers, recent data shows that the numbers might be fewer than people think. In a report put out by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, it states the overall prevalence of a specific risk behavior among teenagers is due primarily to the behavior of multiple risk students. Among the 12% of students reporting regular tobacco use, 85% were multiple risk takers. Now that we reviewed these, let's turn our attention to what should make up the bulk of your paragraph, the analysis of your evidence, right? That's what you're doing, analyzing your evidence. Sorry, just gets me so excited. All right, analysis, blah. What? What is the quote or piece of evidence saying? Here you should put the evidence into your own words and explain what it means. Now I know as the writer it feels redundant, but as the reader, you're still trying to put the pieces together. So some example starters could be, this statistic is showing that. When she says this, she means. In this paper, he is saying that. More guiding questions? What do the particular words or phrases the author is using imply? How do they impact the meaning of this evidence? How does the historical or political context impact the meaning of the evidence? So, our goal right now is answering this what. So an example of that And I'm going to go ahead and keep reading the whole paragraph because I want you to hear and see it build. While the public perception is that teenagers are taking risks in larger numbers, recent data shows that the numbers might be fewer than people think. In a report put out by the U.S. Department of Public Health and Human Services, it states the overall prevalence of a specific risk among teenagers is due primarily to the behavior of multiple risk students among the 12% of students reporting regular tobacco use. 85% were multiple risk takers. This data shows that rather than many students engaging in single examples of risky behavior, instead, the data shows that there are fewer students engaging in risky behaviors, but that many of those teenagers are engaged in multiple types of risky behavior. Oh, I needed that help because I was a little bit confused about this idea of like the 12% versus the 85%. But the person who wrote this had read the whole article, so they could make more sense out of it in their brains and could explain it to me better. Right? Green, why? Why is this particular fact and quote important, right? So after you've explained the evidence and what it is saying, you need to explain why it's important. Like, why do we even care? And if you can't answer that, just so you know, you probably shouldn't include this evidence. So here's some great starters. The data presented here shows that blank's statement is one example of evidence gives us insight into blank because, see this because shows that. Some more guiding questions, right? What is important about this specific piece of evidence? What larger trend is this specific quote information an example of? And maybe you guys are with me here, but I'm at the point where I don't want to read the whole paragraph again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the yellow and the green in this one. So this data shows that rather than many students engaging in single examples of risky behavior, instead, the data shows that there are fewer students engaged in risky behaviors, but that many of those teenagers are engaged in multiple types of risky behavior. The prevalence of multiple risk students gives us insight into teenage behavior by showing us that, in fact, not all teenagers are inherently drawn to taking risks in adolescence. In fact, the concern about risk-taking in adolescence may be overblown for all but a small segment of adolescents. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's why this is important, right? We need to understand that it's being overblown for like a big majority of adolescents when it's just this small group who are taking many risks. Okay, this is our final point of analysis, right? So what are the connections? How does this piece of evidence connect to my thesis and the rest of my paper? Because man, as a reader and somebody who just finished reading a big chunk of senior theses, I am constantly looking for how do I put the pieces together? And again, it is not redundant to make that clear to the reader over and over and over again. So after you've established what your evidence is and why it's important, it's time to explain how it supports your argument and connects to the rest of your paper. The rest of your paper. Just saying it one more time. All right, sentence starters. So this is brilliant, you guys. You can literally copy and paste these sentence starters. Like if you struggle with evidence a lot, try them on. It's a really cute dress or a beautiful raincoat or a sweet car, whatever. The data here reinforces the idea of blank, blank, blank by blank, blank, blank. What blank said contradicts previous points because, oh, contradicts, I love that. Just like making it so clear. What blank says directly supports the idea that, and then finally, the facts presented here, complicated by our picture of blank because of blank. Now, this is where you really do take your writing to the next level, okay? So, more guiding questions. How does this connect to the argument in the topic sentence of this paragraph? Sorry, that's something I'm always looking for. How does this connect to evidence presented in other paragraphs? Does it contradict it, build on it, reinforce it? Intertextuality. How does this piece of evidence support the thesis statement or answer your research question? And finally, what does it mean for the big picture? What conclusions can you draw from this? All right, now let's look at what that, oh, look at the size of the paragraph. This is brilliant. Oh my goodness, totally built out, substantial, cohesive, one clear idea. So let's read all of this together, okay? Sorry, stay with me. You're gonna feel so different about teenagers after this is done. So, while the public perception is that teenagers are taking risks in larger numbers, sorry, starting from the beginning, folks, recent data shows that the number might be fewer than people think. In a report put out by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, it states the overall prevalence of a specific risk behavior among teenagers is due primarily to the behavior of multiple risk students. Among the 12% of students reporting regular tobacco use, 85 were multiple risk takers. This data shows that rather than many students engaging in single examples of risky behavior, instead, the data shows that there are fewer students engaging in risky behaviors, but that many of those teenagers are engaged in multiple types of risky behavior. The prevalence of multiple risk students gives us insight into teenage behavior by showing us that, in fact, not all teenagers are inherently drawn to taking risks in adolescence. Take that in, kids. In fact, the concern about risk-taking in adolescence may be overblown for all but a small segment of adolescents. This data complicates the picture painted by Dr. Siegel in the previous paragraph. While he pointed out that the neural changes in the adolescent brain make them inherently more likely to take risks, and that adolescents make up the largest group of avoidable causes of death, in fact, the evidence presented in the report indicate that these neural changes have more pronounced effects in the behavior of some adolescents than that of the neural changes made not be the primary factor in risky behaviors for adolescents. It seems that instead we must focus on the variables that separate multiple risk takers from the rest of teenagers if we want to create interventions and policies that have the most impact in reducing risky behaviors. Whew, I just have to tell y'all, a paragraph like that will make your teacher's heart sing. So, quick summary. I'm going back to the top. Think about the what. What is this quote or piece of evidence saying? Think about the why. Why does it matter? Why is it important? And think about connections. How can you connect this to other components of your paper and ultimately your thesis? Okay, that is all I have for you today, folks. This resource is available on my DP for you to read maybe more slowly and more intentionally. And I ask you to keep seeing and understanding why I love analysis. Bye.